What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I'm your boy Numbskull, and today I figured we'd do yet another Erowid expedition. This time, I'm going to be reading you a couple of Datura trip reports, and as always, I'll be reading them exactly as they're written. I do hope you all enjoy, and I hope you can't hear my dog barking or my heater flipping on in the background. Don't know if the mic will pick it up or not. Let's get into it. This first report's going to be Touching Death by Depraved Addict off of Erowid. Experience year 2002. Gender male. Age at time of experience not given. Published April 30th, 2003. Drugs taken Datura via a tea at a dose of 50 flowers orally. Body weight 200 pounds. It was late August in 2002 when a friend called me to say he knew where we could get Datura. I was going to college in the fall and, to this point, had never tried a drug that got me high enough, and I had tried 'em all. My friends and I drove to this guy's house and he showed us the plants. He said he had tried smoking the flowers because his wife wouldn't let him smoke pot, and they gave him a very relaxing buzz. We collected about 100 flowers and returned to my friend's house, which was more like a hippie commune. We decided to make the flowers in a mixture of lemon juice and water, and boiled them 1 part lemon juice, 2 parts water, knowing that the acid in the lemon juice would extract the alkaloids we so desperately wanted. Originally, 3 of us were going to take equal shares, but one guy took 1 sip and said it tasted too bad to drink anymore. He was right. It tasted like a combination of lemon juice and nausea-inducing bitterness that still turns my stomach to this day. But we managed to drink half the pot each. 5 minutes later, my stomach was making sounds that said to my brain, "You asshole, you're gonna kill us." We decided to go into town, terrible idea, because we had tripped there many times on acid and no one was the wiser, so we figured how bad could it be. Within 15 minutes of finishing the tea, my other friend had wandered off and I was left alone in my living room with an overwhelming sense of confusion and despair. I tried to go to sleep hoping to avoid the intensely terrible experience I could feel coming on. However, it was much too late for that. I found myself with a desire to move around, to walk, as often happens to me when I trip, and soon I had given up on sleeping. I no longer felt despair, but the confusion had masked to the point of delirium, and I found myself continually walking into walls. Even though I could see them in front of me, they didn't register until long after I had crashed into them. At this point, my memory of the experience becomes incredibly blurred. I remember bits and pieces, such as falling down the stairs repeatedly, my father shaking me, screaming, "What the fuck are you on?" and pulling up the road, playing with it like bread dough, pissing myself, and falling off my back porch and cracking my head open on the stone walkway. I woke up around 10 the next day, about 16 hours after initially ingesting the tea. My mind was still locked in a tripped-out haze, but I could think again. After inspecting myself, I found I was drenched in sweat and urine, and there was a trail of dried blood that ran down my face from the laceration in my skull that I sustained falling off the porch. The effects were still quite evident that day, and I caught up with my buddy who had taken the other half of the tea. We walked around the streets and compared what we remembered of the experiences while still vividly hallucinating. The next 2 weeks were filled with hallucinations and a strange feeling of never quite reaching sobriety. It's now May 2003, 8 months later, and I still don't feel like I have reached total sobriety. I get trails off everything and can lay in bed and watch my ceiling move like a pit of snakes. Occasionally I still get vivid hallucinations. Having now done much more research on the subject, I realize that I overdosed and probably should have been taken to a hospital. However, I'm glad I wasn't because that would have scared the fuck out of me. In the end, I'm glad I did it, but I wouldn't recommend it to anyone because the ease with which I could have died is frightening. And that's going to be the end of the report. That guy definitely bit off more than he could chew at the old sacred bloom. I'm excited to see what this next report has in store, and I'll waste no more time getting to it. Panic and Strange Encounters in London by a student nurse off of Erowid. Experience year 2001. Gender male. Age at time of experience not given. Published February 4th, 2001. Drugs taken were Datura via seeds at a dose of 175 seeds oral. There was a horror film triple bill on at the cinema, and I thought I would take some Datura to make things interesting. I had read something on Datura a while back saying how the user hallucinates and that these hallucinations seem real. I thought that if I took some, then some 3D hallucinations would complement the film and make for a great experience. So it was that I chewed up a handful of the seeds before going to watch the film Scary Movie. Anyway, I was disappointed. All that happened was that the damn seed sent me to sleep about halfway through the film. I woke up toward the end and felt that I had wasted my time. However, when I went to get up, my balance went and I staggered down the steps of the cinema wondering what the hell was going on. Feeling disoriented, I struggled to gain my balance and thought that maybe some food would do me some good, so I had to do a Burger King. I had trouble walking straight, and I remember one person saying as I passed, "He looks like he's on drugs," and that person's companion saying, "Yeah, you can always tell." This did not fill me with confidence as I headed into the burger bar. I decided to order a large, extra value meal and sit down with my tray of food. I didn't feel hungry, but I felt that I should eat to give my body the ability to cope with the effects of the seeds. My first mouthful was a real effort. My saliva had almost dried up completely. I managed one more mouthful, but on the third mouthful, the food just lodged in my throat and it took a huge mouthful of Coke to shift it. I noticed now that an old woman and her grandson who were sitting opposite had stopped eating and were now just watching me. I happened to look down at this point and saw that my hands were bright red. At this point, the thought came to me that something weird and powerful was happening to me and I should get the hell home as quickly as possible. I quickly left and staggered through the crowded streets to the station for my train home. I remember thinking my lucky stars that the train was on the platform and due to depart in a couple of minutes. I sat down on the train and breathed a sigh of relief. The train departed. Unfortunately, sleep was overtaking me. On route to my stop, I drifted in and out of sleep. What was worse was that on waking, I found myself muttering gibberish to myself. I quickly shut myself up, saw that a couple of people on the crowded train looking at me, unresolved to stay awake only to fall asleep again. One time I woke, the train was just pulling into my stop and, thanking my lucky stars again, I ran for the doors. Well, I made it the short walk back home. However, home was a nearly deserted old nurse's home and not the most welcoming of places. As I walked up the corridor to the lift, I saw a man walking his dog. Then the man and dog walked into a wall and disappeared. This was one particular moment that I will remember till the day I die, but I didn't want to hang around. I just wanted to get to bed and sleep off the effect of the seeds. I did not make it to bed. Outside my room, a group of beings greeted me. I quickly realized that although they looked similar to us, they were not human. One male had a round head and an absolutely huge smile that suggested a mouth containing about 100 teeth. Another male had a face that smoothly merged into his neck with no chin whatsoever. A female had some type of microchip eyes. These characters greeted me telepathically. They then escorted me up the corridor and pointed out a hieroglyphic drawn in some exposed plaster on the wall and said that they had done that themselves. Around this time, I remember looking at the hallway carpet as I stretched up the hall thinking, wow, what a huge long dress that lady was wearing. Everything gets kind of hazy from now on. Several details are clear, however. Soon after I entered my room, two different beings presented themselves who communicated telepathically with each other. Some telepathic thoughts entered my head on occasions, the details of which I cannot unfortunately remember. I remember feeling extremely inferior and loudly stated that it was an unfair situation because I was having to rely on speech. I did telepathically communicate hello to one of them at one point. I got a look from both of them as if I had been making a rude gesture toward them before more telepathic communication was sent to me a few seconds later. I remember feeling also that I should show some hospitality to my guests and went to the kitchen to fill a kettle to make some tea for them. I returned to my room, made 2 mugs of tea, and asked the being who was sat in my armchair if he would like a mug. This being just sat there and looked at me. I put the tea down and said that if he wanted it, then he should help himself to it. Shortly after, or maybe before, I was walking in the corridor when I saw more beings lurking in a dark, unlit section of corridor. I felt extremely uneasy about this and went to call on a friend who lived on the floor below. But just as I was approaching his door, I noticed more of these beings and I turned back. I hammered on the door of another friend. She answered and asked, "What is it?" My mind then went blank, and I paused before blurting out how the cleaner had emptied my cupboard of food. I don't remember her response, but she swiftly closed her door, leaving me in a state of panic. I decided to phone security. I said how there were a couple of intruders on the premises. The security man put me through to the police. I said that there were a couple of dodgy characters in the building who were near me now. However, just as I was saying this, I began to feel some warmth to the beings and began regretting my call. The policeman asked if they had made any direct threat to me, to which I replied that, well, no, they hadn't exactly. I then said that they probably had much more serious things to deal with, and apologized. The policeman said a patrol car would come around anyway. I put the phone down and winced. I really didn't want the police to interfere and possibly endanger my new friends, as I had suddenly come to regard them. After a few minutes, I made my way to the front lounge where the TV was on. I had now realized that it was very late, in the middle of the night. There were two more beings in the lounge watching TV, and I peeked through the curtains and saw to my relief a patrol car pulling away. I turned back to the room and saw that the beings had stopped watching TV and were looking at me. I was now feeling thirsty and drank from the tap in the kitchenette a bit at the edge of the lounge. Tried to engage these beings in conversation, but they just ignored me and watched TV. I sat down and joined them. They communicated with each other, but ignored me. Occasionally, one or the other would vanish. I would turn to find one of them gone and seconds later reappear. By now, nothing was surprising me. Meanwhile, the last program of the night had finished and there was just a text information service on the TV screen, as is normal for 4:30 a.m. I joked to one of the beings whether he was a fan of the night screen information program. No response. I went back to my bedroom. The two beings who had been there originally were still there. They were now vanishing and reappearing. As time went on, they began to vanish for longer and longer periods, and I knew that they would leave for good soon. After a while, there was only one left, and he looked a bit sickly or tired. I felt a bit helpless that there was nothing I could do to help, and eventually he disappeared for good. Feeling myself left on my own finally, my thought was unsure of what exactly reality was. I did feel privileged to have such an experience, and lucky that I had made it home. The friend whose door I hammered on told me later that it had been 3:30 when I had knocked, 12 hours after swallowing the seeds. If there had been people around while I had been prowling the corridors, then who knows what might have happened. I also think that there may have been a lucid dream element somewhere. I have now started doing exercises to facilitate lucid dreams, and on one occasion, as I was falling asleep, as my mind was throwing up hypnagogic images, up popped one of the beings, one of the types with no chin. Well, I shot awake in bed with a startle, and it took me a while to settle again. However, I suppose that if I manage to regularly repeat this, then it will be less of a surprise, and I may engage consciously with this being sometime. Maybe? I would definitely recommend Datura to those broad-minded enough to cope with otherworldly happenings. Was I flirting with schizophrenia, or was I engaging with extraterrestrial beings? Whatever. It certainly opened my mind, and I will be definitely taking it again once more, once I have got to grips with lucid dreaming. This is the intuition telling me what to do now. And that is going to be the end of the second report, ladies and gentlemen. That one was really interesting, and a tad bit disturbing, if I do say so myself. These reports that people submit of their experiences with psychoactive substances, planned or otherwise, are really valuable pieces of media for helping to understand exactly what these substances are like on a subjective level, and helpful for less adventurous people to see what they're like without having to try them for themselves. I, for one, enjoyed reading these, and I hope you guys enjoyed listening. If you did, maybe like the video so that I know I'm doing something right here. Also, please consider subscribing as it would help the channel out immensely. And don't forget those post notifications so you don't miss anything. In my niche, it's difficult to get videos seen sometimes, so there's a chance you may not get recommended them even if you're subscribed to me. Again, I hope you all enjoy what I do here, and I will of course see you all in the next one. Peace!